Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Changhao Chen. I'm the director of technology panel and the second-year PhD student in computer science. This year, the technology panel will be exploring the topic artificial intelligence and the future of work. AI is in news almost every day. It has been described as new electricity, which will revolutionize many industries, from automotive to manufacturing to healthcare. Cities are getting smarter, cars are driving themselves, and AI is helping doctors to detect disease more accurately. China has been taking a leading role in the development of AI. Last year, China received 1/3 of the world's AI funding, published more papers on deep learning than the United States, and grew to host 23% of the world's AI companies. Innovative products such as mobile payments, e-commerce delivery, autonomous cars, and the sharing economies are shaping China's economy and driving rapid growth in AI development. At the same time, the Chinese government is dedicating resources on a scale we haven't seen before to ensure the success of this industry. We do not yet know how AI will affect the workforce or come to change our lives. In this panel, we will discuss the frontier of the global and China's AI industries, attitudes to the AI, and how AI will affect the global economy and the balance of power. This year, we have brought together 3 speakers, including leading scholars and business leaders. Let me introduce their Professor Michael Wooldridge, the head of Computer Science Department, University of Oxford. Professor Yike Guo, the founding director of Big Data Institute, Imperial College, London, and Dr. Vahdat, the CEO and co-founder of Medopad, an AI-based healthcare unicorn company. Unfortunately, because of the extreme weather condition, Katherine Guo can't join us this time. And we will begin with a discussion with panelists, and will be followed by 20 minutes audience Q&A. My colleague, Ms. Katherine Stapleton, the director of technology panel and a second-year PhD student in economics, will lead the discussion. And I hope you will enjoy our panel. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks for the introduction, Jasper. Thanks to everybody for coming. So I thought to start, to set the scene, we would first talk a bit about recent developments in AI globally and where China fits in. Michael or Yike, do you like to?
Sure. So the first thing to say is AI is not a new thing. AI has been around for 60 years. And the story of AI over that 60 years is the story of ideas and technologies that looked like they were really promising, but then didn't manage to deliver on the expectations that people had set up for them. So I can vividly remember as an undergraduate student in the 1980s, there was a technology called expert systems, and people really believed that this was going to be a kind of a world-changing technology, that the future of computing was all going to be about expert systems and so on. Many startup companies, lots of investment, lots of excitement, and it didn't really work out. Within 10 years, expert systems, the technology is still around, but it didn't change the world. And so there's been this continual story of expectations going very, very high, but then this kind of disappointment subsequently. So what's happened over the last 15 years is that there have been developments which, from a scientific perspective, are incredibly exciting. So we've gone, within the space of 15 to 20 years, from having no reliable technology that could translate from one language to another in a kind of competent way, to that just being a routine thing that we just all take for granted now. We've gone to having computers capable of recognizing faces better than people can. That's just a scientific fact. Computers are better at recognizing faces in a crowd than people are. And there's a whole host of these other technologies, these other ideas that have come about over the last 15 years through advances in AI. And these are genuine and really exciting from a scientific perspective, and they are going to make possible incredible new products and services that you're going to get through your smartphone that are going to be embedded in all the devices that you use in your everyday life. But that doesn't mean that the kind of the Hollywood dream of having kind of robot butlers or robot armies taking over the world is anytime soon. That's not where we're at. What we're at is having these incredible new technologies that work in very, very narrow problem areas. Okay, so the excitement, I think, is there for a reason, and it's genuine. Why did it come about was the question. I think 3 things to make this technology work, which is based on a particular AI approach called machine learning. It turns out you needed lots and lots of data. If you're going to train a program to recognize faces, you just need lots and lots of examples of the faces that you want to train it. So every time you upload a picture to social media, to Facebook or WeChat, as I learned today, one of those programs, what you're doing is you're giving a machine learning program training data that it can use subsequently to recognize faces. So number 1, you needed big data. Number 2, it's computationally expensive to do this training. You need to throw lots of computer power at it. And 20 years ago, it was just expensive to do that. You needed supercomputers to do it. Now the supercomputers fit in your pocket, right? So the availability of computer technology is there cheaply. And then finally, what you needed was some scientific breakthroughs. So some of you in the audience have heard about the hottest of all the hot technologies is something called deep learning. Well, it's the deep part of the deep learning, which is the new thing, which has been around for just over a decade, which has made these things possible. So what's new in AI? Lots of data, cheap computer power to use so that computers can be trained with that data, and some scientific advances, the deep part of the deep learning. And that's why we are where we are. That's why we've got this excitement.
Right. Yeah, Michael said all I want to say. So I agree with you completely, right? The AI is not something new. In fact, I came to this country 30 years ago. It's all because of AI. At the time, Michael probably remember that, as Japan had its 5th generation computer project. And in UK, there is a project called the LV project. And the Imperial College built a machine called Alice machine. I was the last person who joined this team. So in fact, I was in Changhao University. At the time, China also launched its own 5th generation computer system. So I was the one who actually I was actually the Chinese PhD student to actually working in this area. So I was sent to UK to learn the 5th generation computer systems. So at the time, as Michael said very rightly, the hot subject of the AI is reasoning, is logic programming, is expert system. It's very useful, and it's really give a lot of people promise. And also, there's a country called Japan, with the 2nd world largest economy at the time, just like China now. And there was an ambitious project with a lot of government money to start this project with the goal to conquer the AI as a leap jump in the computer science to overtake America. There's a lot of things we can actually learn from that. And then you actually now put a lot of money into it, a lot of investment. Is also one of the biggest investments. Most of the paper published in AI at the time was actually Japan. And we all sort of follow a bit. So we actually tried to build called the influence machine, I remember. That was the time. So it doesn't succeed, right? It's not deliver what is promised. And AI, that was that kind of the technology of the AI. And then, 20, 30 years later, you come this heap, right? This wave. So people wave on the machine learning. My sort of trajectory is I come here, I did the 5th generation computer, it doesn't work so much. And the UK was actually stopped quite early. So I moved to the logic programming. I did inductive logic programming. Now it's kind of the old-fashioned machine learning, if you like. So, and then I teach machine learning on the 97 in Imperial, and my class is only have 12 people, because people don't want to learn what is machine learning. But now, we have about 800 people to actually register the machine learning. We can only recruit the machine learning students for about 120. So this is a completely different world now. Machine learning is the one of the key and the most hottest subject. As Michael said very rightly, that all because of technology development of deep learning, but also the materials of the deep learning is a big data. And also the computational power is available now to crunch this big data to actually take some knowledge out of it. So that's all coming today. But what I'm going to say is we should be really aware, right? We don't really repeat the mistake we made in the fifth-generation computer system. Technology development need a very robust work, very hard research, rather than just create a couple of hype. Yes, machines do very well now on recognize picture, understand properly the words, can do some QA system in a simple way. But have to realize, probably we can do perception very well, but human intelligence has very aspects, right? Forget about consciousness, emotion, so on. You have this issue of the cognition. Not everything is perception, right? Can really see a picture doesn't mean you have the intelligence. So we have we have a long way to go to actually really build something which we can call them intelligent. But although this is our job, right? We always try to acquire new knowledge. We always try to liberate ourselves from physical power now to mental power. But the whole point of this is that all the technology need a very serious research, and we have to devote a serious thinking rather than just a couple of market hype words. So deep learning is just one technology which is very important now, but it's not the end of the history, not even beginning of the history. So we have a long way to go. That's my view.
Brilliant. So maybe we can move to thinking a bit more about where China fits in terms of AI.
Sure.
So Dan, I know you've recently been on a trip to China with Theresa May on her trade mission. What are kind of your perceptions about the development of the AI industry in China?
As mentioned, China is investing a lot of capital into the space of doing something intelligent with data, whether you want to call it and make it fancy and call it AI or whatever terms. And when you put capital, smartest people, they start working on hardest problems. And in China, given that you have a lot of population, ultimately you can have a lot of data which fuels any intelligent system and for training purposes. And I have seen some good projects happening. We did a partnership with Ping An, good doctor, around monitoring the health of people, and they're already using a lot of predictive analytics in terms of like addressing the needs of users. And given that you have a demand coming from everyone in China that they're almost connected and they're very much into their phones more than even, I would say, UK, you need solutions and technologies that they can be real time. And human beings, we are not real time animals. We work, I don't know, we wake up at 7 a.m., 5 a.m., and we go to bed at 10 p.m. But a lot of services, they need real time attention. And this is where we think some sort of intelligence machines, whether simple or complicated, doesn't matter. It can add value. So in medicine, I think it will play a big role. Still, we are at the early days of it. But I think China has a big opportunity to lead that, given the size of the data. But also, we believe UK has an opportunity to contribute because we have a lot of historical data. In the healthcare space that I'm familiar, I think UK has the biggest data assets of any countries in terms of having it historically. And the second country is Sweden, but the population is small. So I think there is a really interesting synergy between UK historical data as well as China, the massive size. And that's what you need to train systems and slowly getting it better and better. So Ping An example is a good example, but there are a lot of other examples that Chinese, they're using it for security purposes in airports and like train stations and in the car industry, a bunch of the companies, startup companies, they're using it a lot. So that's kind of the observations we have had, and we are quite excited to work with best talents from China, best talents from the UK, and globally to see what we can do in this space. It's still very early days. Sometimes the shadow is ahead of where we are. However, it doesn't matter, because as long as the capital is coming, as long as the smartest people put their mind, we're gonna contribute and we're gonna have a good progress. And that's why we are very excited as a company in this space.
Awesome. So kind of related to that, there's kind of a lot of talk of a kind of AI arms race between China and the US in terms of trying to develop the AI industry at a really rapid speed. What do you think are the relative strengths and weaknesses of China in AI? We've touched a bit upon the data and the size of the population. Any other areas where China's kind of ahead? Or behind? Or?
All right. Maybe I'll start with this. I think this, I mentioned in my previous talk, is this is, Japan had this fifth generation computer systems in about 30 years ago. So I think China now is the second world economy. My view is that may be the controversial sentence. The second world economy, being number two, is always have some number two syndrome. Right? Number two syndrome is always try to, number one is want to be the number one. And then always think they can be number one, and also want to be actually challenge the number one. So-called arm race is really come from this terminology. And I really don't like this word at all, arm race. And I really think when you're talking about AI, is a research, is technology development, and probably an industry. And there's no number one, no number two. And the really healthy thing is our global efforts to work very dedicatedly and very consciously and very organized in a way to develop this technology for the whole mankind. Number one, number two is really not that important. And technology is all shared, right? And to be frankly, China do have its need of the AI, as the previous speaker talked about is, for example, in the healthcare area. A huge population require some part of the medical work done by the machine. And in fact, China did very well. I was very impressed in last summer when I'm back. I got some problem, I got Changhao actually, very, very nasty problems here. And then, GP took a long time to actually put me into the queue. So I returned to China to have a queue. And China has actually did very well. It's all machine, They took the pictures and did a scan and did a medical picture segmentations all by the machine. I'm pretty impressed. It's not that much bigger hospital. It's a local hospital in Beijing. So I really feel, there is technical development is really important for the society. But really on the research side, what I really feel is not healthy is we compete a lot on the number of the paper published, and we compete in who win the prize. That's not what science is all about. What we should really do at China is forget about number two, number one, really focus on what is the real problems and we're facing, what is the scientific challenge we have, and seriously tackle these problems and find a novel scientific solution. If the research is this way, then it's extremely healthy. And I really, in this way, I think Britain have a lot of the innovation made, right? For example, right, the arm race. I think, people said, I read the sort of the the questionnaire gave to me, say, now competition between Beijing and the Silicon Valley. Not quite true. I think Oxford, London, and Cambridge did very well. And don't forget, the AlphaGo is not in the Silicon Valley, not in Beijing. And also, very much we have to think about it. Not really try to follow somebody and try to be the number one. And think about this, for example, driverless car. How many Chinese companies invest so much money in the driverless car in China? Let's think carefully. Does China need a driverless car? I think it would be horrible if you have a driverless car in Beijing to join this not arm race, but car race in the highway, with half the car is main driver, half the car is actually driverless. It's not going to work at all. It will block the whole traffic, right? Because the driverless car don't know how to act with so many mad people there. So you got to really think about this. Is that we need it? It's just because Google have a car drive well in the 500 sort of the kilometer now without record, so we have to beat it by 600 kilometer. That is ridiculous. So I think what China really need is scientific-driven research, problem-driven research, technical development, find its own way, learn a lot from the world, but also make its own innovation. I think that is the right way to do. I don't like arm race. The arm race is stupid. We are doing scientific research and science development. It's not really building arms. That's my view.
So I completely agree with the two comments about scale, and I think that's an incredible advantage. When you need data in huge quantities and you have a population of 1.4 billion people, 5 times the size of the United States, that's a huge, huge advantage for companies based in China. So that's one thing. I think it's also worth saying that I think having the ability to set a national direction, which is very difficult in a country like the United Kingdom. In the UK, we like to be anarchists. We just like to disagree with the government. And if somebody tells us this is what you should be doing, we like to say no and do exactly the opposite. And if you're thinking about setting up a situation where you can have driverless cars, it's incredibly difficult to do that. I mean, if you have to introduce new government legislation to design new roads and introduce new laws and so on, that kind of thing in the UK just takes a long, long time. It's very difficult. And it's the same in the United States because there is this kind of culture of just being difficult. We don't like governments telling us what to do. Whereas in China, I mean, there is a much stronger sense of national direction, and the ability of the government to set a national agenda is just much stronger. So there is a real opportunity for China there to use that and to forge ahead in areas like driverless cars, but maybe not in Beijing. So those two things I think are worth saying. I think as an AI researcher, what I've noticed over the last 20 years has been an incredible growth in the Chinese presence at scientific conferences. 20 years ago, most of the presence of Chinese people at international conferences was typically through US university. It was professors that went and did individuals that went and did a PhD in the United States and stayed there, or were doing a postdoc in the United States. And by and large, people tended not to go back 20 years ago. They would stay in the United States because the research opportunities there were so good, because the funding was available, the ability to interact with companies. And that has changed. And if you go to one of the big AI conferences now, you really see a huge presence of China, not just Chinese people, of China. And that's a really, really marked change. I guess if I was going to be sort of setting a national research agenda for AI for China, I would have 2 pieces of advice. And I think the first piece of advice is you can't just build everything on one narrow technology. You need breadth. You need an entire kind of ecosystem around not just machine learning, which is where all this focus of attention is, but on computing more generally. So I think I would really strongly advise there needs to be big investment, not just in narrow technologies. To have that investment is good, but invest more broadly in these research technologies. But the other thing I would say is this. So let me ask a question of the audience. Who's got an Apple phone? Just put your hand up if you've got an Apple phone. Okay, yeah, me too. So why have you got an Apple phone? These are not the fastest phones. They don't have the most memory. They certainly don't have the best battery life, right? I mean, that's for sure. So why have you got an Apple phone? What do Apple get right that other companies don't get right? What they get right is not just the technology, the camera, and all the hardware. They get the interface right. They make this technology usable. And frankly, most other phone companies are pale imitations of Apple software when it comes to usability. Apple still absolutely dominate in that space. That's why they are the world's biggest company. It isn't because they make the longest battery life, it's because they make that technology usable. So the next piece of advice is, just betting everything on machine learning, if you can't make that technology usable, is not going to make you the world leaders. You have to understand the human factors, how people use this technology. And those are a completely different set of skills. So those, I guess, are my slightly disjointed kind of observations.
Great. Fascinating.
Maybe add a few more words?
Sorry?
I'd like to add a few more words on this.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think I quite agree with what Michael said here. Now, broadness is very important, not just the machine learning. And really, if we really think about want to make China, of course, China now has advanced quite a lot in the computer science research. But if you really want to make a fundamental contribution to the mankind on this area, the broader the investment into the computational research, computer science, and really treat this one as a really information technology investment, that would be very, very healthy. And not just one particular technology, I totally agree. Another thing is set a national agenda. Should we really take care about what is China's real need? For example, healthcare. I think it's really the need that China really face a big challenge of a deal with aging population, right? In about 10 years later, China will be half of Chinese population will be in the age above 60. If we're thinking about this kind of the situation, healthcare is a very big challenge, right? Rather than we need a more driverless car. So actually, if we focus on this, focus on the AI to help the medical, from the medical research and also the medical industry, focus on healthcare, then it will be very big impact to the China's development, but also to the mankind. I think that kind of the national agenda is really needed. National agenda should be set up with the national need, rather than just compete with the United States. That's a ridiculous idea.
Brilliant. So Dan, do you have anything to add kind of on that topic of healthcare and the potential of AI to transform healthcare in China?
Well, I guess aging is a big problem globally. It's not only for China. And with advancement of medicines, we're going to all live longer, which means that more things can go wrong, meaning that you need to balance the body, human body, with more data. And when you're talking more data, as a human being, we have limited capacity of processing those data. If you go back 60 years, 100 years, people could forecast weather conditions just with few sensors you had, in the back of your garden. But today you have like data from everywhere in the globe, and then you come up with some forecast, which is much better, still not perfect, but much better than we used to do. So similar sort of mindset can be applied into human body. And I think given that from the age 60 to 90, maybe 100, 110, a lot of things can go wrong. Being able to find when a complication happens to a patient, because we die not because of our disease. Nobody dies because of diabetes directly. You die because of the complications that diabetes can cause you. And complications, you can predict that. You can prevent them by looking at data, by monitoring with different sensors. These are some examples, but a lot of other data that CT, MRI, connected, real-time, disconnected, not real-time data assets combined together. And this is beyond anyone's brain capacity. And diseases, they're connected. If you have cardiovascular, you have a higher risk of getting Alzheimer. if you have Alzheimer's, you have higher risk of getting some other diseases. So it's not like diseases are like separate from each other. And in a world that a lot of things are connected, then you even have more links. And more links, it requires more computational power. And again, this is where machine can play a big role. But we are still far from solving these hard problems, because still AI is quite limited to single problems. We are far, far from artificial general intelligence, which is basically the concept that a lot of people think about it, they get worried about it, but we are not there yet. And I will share with you some of the thinkings I had last night, where we think we are today and where we're gonna be. Data will play a big role. Machine learning, predictive analytics play a big role, but we are still at the very early days of it.
Right. Awesome. Any other thoughts, so kind of on the theme of influence of AI on areas of life? Any other thoughts on kind of areas where AI has big potential to shape society that you think will be happening?
I think the healthcare example is a really good one. So, and I think you picked up on sort of wearable technology. Fitbits are all the thing at the moment. My teenage kids have Fitbits, all their friends do. They all compete to see how many steps they can do in a day and so on. And these are essentially first generation devices that are providing a stream of physiological data about you and feeding it to a supercomputer in a pocket, your smartphone. And these are first generation devices. And in 20 years, the devices that we're going to be wearing are going to be as different from those first generation devices as your iPhone X is from the first generation Nokia phone mobile phone was 20 years ago. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen with all that data, but it's going to be incredible. I mean, you're going to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your health is going to be monitored and fed to a supercomputer, which is going to be able to give you diagnostic advice about how to live your life. It's going to know when you're stressed. It's going to know when you're excited. It's going to know about your most intimate moments. I mean, it's really going to be that. This is very, very intimate technology. And that, I think, is going to be an incredible opportunity, an unprecedented opportunity. You know, potentially everybody in the population having the status of their health monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's very exciting. But I think also, in addition to that kind of personal healthcare, if you think about rolling out something like the National Health Service across the whole of China to 1.4 billion people, it'd be tremendously difficult to provide, let's say, trained radiologists right now in the space of a few years across the whole of a country the size of China. So there is AI software now that can look at X-rays and look at cardiograms and can diagnose cancers and heart disease by looking at those. And the debate in this country is about, do you really want machines doing that or people? And there is this very strong sense that, we really want people to be able to look at that. But actually, what if the choice is between having a machine look at your cardiogram or nothing look at it, right? I mean, the choice is not necessarily between a machine and a person. It's between a machine and nothing. So actually, healthcare, AI-driven healthcare there, I think, has a real opportunity to be a massive boost for healthcare provision, not just in China, but globally. I mean, huge parts of the world still have essentially nothing like an institutionalized health service in the way that we're lucky enough to have in the UK. So that, I think, is a really exciting opportunity for AI. And I think I don't know exactly where we're going to be in that space, but we will be in that space somewhere. And I think that can only be a benefit for society.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the one thing you think about the healthcare is a wonderful example. The other thing in general, right, what the AI provided you, in my opinion, is personalization of everything, right? So healthcare, you're talking about personalized medicine, because now your medical care can be really customized to fit your own purpose, your own biological characteristics, and your own symptoms, and all your own lifestyle, because we understand you now. Same to this. You can apply because of the personal data availability. So we can really use this one to understand you as an individual, digitalize you. Digitalize a person, have a very big impact on everything. Now you can talk about personalized food, personalized fashion. In fact, I actually I invest a company, and also I'm particularly involved in this company to now use the AI to provide, the clothes design. So you take a photo of you, and then we'll be calculating precisely the figure of you, and then send it to UK to actually make customized clothes for you. Because rather than you buy import clothes, which are very expensive, you can do this on the internet. But do this one in a personalized way. Everything can be personalized. If you really think this route, and then healthcare is one, is personalized medicine. You can think about personalized food, personalized fashion, personalized education. Another student have a company in Shenzhen who actually try to learning what a student have the problem about, and then design examination questions or design exercise questions for this particular student on the internet to train him or her a particular skill. That's another personalization. So if you really ask me what AI will give human a real impact, is everything can be personalized. And plus the internet, you can deliver that personalized service to in all the aspects, from finance, personalized credit, personalized financial instruments, financial service, personalized clothes, personalized food, personalized education. That will be our future. That will be very exciting.
Oh, fascinating possibilities. So this has all been pretty positive. Interestingly, a lot of the media is often very negative about an AI future and about the concept of technological unemployment. I'm guessing you guys are relatively positive. Do you have any thoughts on this question?
Sure. I think fundamentally, people, us included, by the way, we don't fully understand where we are in this story of AI. And we, again, misunderstand artificial general intelligence with the kind of AI we are talking. Right now, anything is happening is about simplifying one thing. A radiology example was a good example. Facial recognition is a good example. And I was thinking last night, and for the past 4 weeks, about the topic. We have a challenge in our own company because we have to hire 400, 500 people in a span of 12, 18 months. And we realized nobody, or not that many people, they have done it, at least in London. And we were thinking how we can break it down to the pieces that we can solve this problem. And then I came to this understanding, human being, our brain, is quite limited the way we are using it, because the speed of our data input, the speed that we can talk, it's very slow. And if you go back to historical moments, in Egypt, you see these pictures of people building buildings and constructions, and you see a lot of people working. And then you compare that with Burj Khalifa in Dubai, that they built all sort of things very quickly with very limited number of people, but they used machine to do that. There is nothing enhancing us as human, the way we interact. Physically, we have built robots and cars and machines, but our brains and the way our brains get data, download and upload data, is quite limited. And the reason I'm talking about this, because I came to this realization, possibly we as a human being, our brain is not even ready to create artificial general intelligence. And we need to add some capabilities so we can learn more, so we can be in that position. I give you another example. Da Vinci, he tried to build a flying machine, right? and he couldn't because he didn't have the required machines to build the precision of the engines and other things that the two brothers in the US about 100 years ago they had, and they managed to solve that problem because they had the machine helping them to build some other tools that ultimately create a magical power of flying. Flying is a magical power. We created that, but we couldn't create it just like this. It had to go. Same goes for AI in the sense that people think about it. This, power that will come and take over the whole world, and some people are very concerned and take all of the jobs. So what I'm trying to say here is we are not there. So nobody needs to freak out. So we are all safe still. However, we need to use this technology of looking at data and predicting, and personalizing is a good word because it's all about person. The same way that mobiles and PCs, they kind of brought personalized computing to us. Now it's like a personalized everything for us based on what we want before we wanted that thing. And that's kind of like the trend. And I think by having investment, and there will be mistakes, and there will be a lot of hypes. There's already a lot of hypes, but that's okay. Because we believe, and a lot of people believe, by more investment in the space, some good things will come out of it. And we are like benefiting some of those. Amazon is using it all the time for your based on your purchase history. Facebook, sometimes it's a little bit freaky, but you type something and suddenly a friend of yours that worked in that company shows up in your profile as a friend to connect with. And there are a lot of examples in China. They're using it because of the scale they have. So that's, I guess, our little understanding of this space. But again, I want to repeat, we are just part of the story, and we only understand this much. And we still have to learn as us as a company, what are the possibilities of the future.
Yeah, Michael.
AI and unemployment, I think that there have been a lot of scare stories about this, and it's very easy to believe that somehow there's going to be this kind of cliff edge that we're going to drop off and there won't be any jobs. And I think, like you, I totally agree that this is not terribly plausible. But actually, I think to understand what's going on, you have to look at what's gone on over the last, not just a couple of 100 years, but over the last thousands of years. The automation of human labor is nothing new. Go back to the very first fields that were plowed to sow crops when agriculture first happened. Who plowed those fields? It wasn't a tractor, it wasn't a horse, it wasn't an ox, it was a person, right? And at some point it was discovered that you could use oxen and then horses, and then much more recently we started using tractors, and this is just the automation of human labor, and it's just making people much more efficient at their jobs. Go back 200 years or thereabouts to the Industrial Revolution, and the way that things were manufactured was more or less in cottage industries, right? It was down at the level of individual households that were producing goods. And the huge step, the huge innovation was to start producing things in factories with a large degree of automation that took away human labor. It was just the automation of human labor. And it was controversial at the time. It put people out of work. But actually what happened is the economy expanded as a consequence. Society got richer, and we ended up as a society better off than we were beforehand. So I think we have to see AI as just the latest technology in a very long chain of technologies that have been automating human labor. And will it be a kind of sudden cliff edge, which means there are no jobs left? I think no is the answer. Some colleagues of mine at Oxford, led by Michael Osborne in the engineering department here at the University of Oxford, did a report which was very widely circulated on this about 4 years ago. And they come up with some startling conclusions. And I think the headline conclusion was that something like 47% of jobs were amenable for automation at some point in the future. So this got kind of global headlines and made them very, very famous. But they pointed out there are some things that you can do, some skills that you can have, which are going to make your job very difficult to automate. So if your job involves a lot of social skills, a lot of human social interaction, you're going to be safe. If your job involves creativity, creating things, you're going to be safe. Interestingly, if your job involves lots of manual dexterity, doing very fine manual dexterous jobs, you're going to be safe. You know, so that kind of dystopian prospect, if it happens, is a long way in the future. And there are skills that you can have which are going to make you very safe against that kind of automation. But will AI take jobs? Yes, it will. But understand that as just part of technological progress. Generally, it's not something which is fundamentally new, in my opinion.
You know, I sit in a really lucky seat. After Michael is I will say something. And I always say Michael said exactly what I want to say in a much better English. So it's a very big challenge to me. But just add a couple more points. I think, you know, I'm also optimistic, and I totally agree. It's not going to happen. The machine will take our job away. And but what the point I want to add on is, the one thing we forgot is our human also improve, also evolve, right? Because of the machine. So all this talking, right, a machine will be better than a human, or so on, is have one assumption, you know, we never change, which is actually quite wrong. And we change a lot, right? So there is for example, sometimes change is bad because, for example, I cannot remember my phone number anymore. I used to remember phone number very nicely because I have to remember it. But now I have iPhone, it remembers much better than me, and I don't really need to bother. So therefore, that piece of the intelligence probably goes somewhere. And of course now, for example, if you go to the navigate road, I'm not really bothered too much to remember because I have the Google map. There's a lot of things actually we give the machine to do. On the other hand, we actually do a lot of things better, and with machine's help. For example, everybody have experience, there's a lot of Chinese here. When you write an email or write an article, we write them much faster now. Why? Because we don't need to precisely remember an English word, right? You just type in roughly, and the machine will correct for you anyway. That's a beautiful thing for us, right? So we write much better now, and write much faster. So this kind of thing is improve our human. But very important thing here, also we read a lot these days. It's not because of the internet gives us a lot of reading materials, and because we have more time. One thing very important I want to say is in the future, my view is, there's no kind of separation between the job is done by machine and the job done by human. It's going to be man and machine will have this kind of symbiotic relationship. It's mixed. It's just we both become more clever. Machine learn us a lot to be an intelligent machine. We learn a lot from machine. We become a more intelligent human. That's much more healthy. I think that will happen in the future. We have become much more clever. There's one argument in China, you know, I was just talking about the data capital in the future economic world, and one scholar stand up and say, how can you challenge Karl Marx? You know, all you're talking about is Marx said it in so many years studies, so on, and I'm just thinking, hey, one thing is true, right? My 1 week's reading, probably more than Karl Marx for whole his life. It's not because I'm more clever. It's just because I have so more material to read. It's so easy to access. You have to go to British Library. I don't need to. I just stay home. I can do everything he can do in a better way. So therefore, human improvement should be put in the equation. We are much more clever now. You will be much more clever than us. And your next generation will be more clever than you. So why do you need to worry about the machine? So I really don't understand it. So we have to put human evolution into the equation. Okay, that's my view.
Great. So now we're going to open up the floor to audience questions. So does anyone have any questions? Yes, over there.
Thank you. machine learning is flourishing because we have more computational power at our disposal than before. Moore's law says that in the past, every 18 months, the number of transistors we put on the unit size on the chip doubles. And with all this computational power, we can run more complex statistical models and do more analysis, achieve all of us. But I've heard that from chip makers, this Moore's law is changing. Now we have kind of meet the physical limitation of the material. The chip makers can't put more transistors down there. We don't have any more like exponentially increasing in the computational power. You say sometimes we can parallelize some of our algorithms. So we use multiple cores, multiple CPUs to think at the same time, but some of the algorithms cannot be parallelized. So do you think that with this limitation in computational power, this will be a barrier to keep us from all the opportunities you mentioned, and how are we going to overcome it? Thank you.
Yeah, a colleague recently pointed me at a research paper that came, I think, from Google. And within this paper, they had a number of graphs. It was a machine learning paper. They had a number of graphs where each graph had been generated by using quite a lot of computer processor power. And actually, they told you how much computer processor power was required to produce each graph. So my colleague had done some sums, and he reckoned for the 50-odd graphs that were in this paper, each one required about $20,000 worth of computer processor power. So the whole paper, just the computer processor power required to create this paper was about $1 million worth of computer processor power. So what bothers me about this is not actually the number of chips that are required or anything like that. You're quite right that kind of Moore's law, as we were used to it, is at an end. But nevertheless, computer processing power will just get cheaper. I mean, you just won't get this kind of increase in speed that we were used to for so long. But nevertheless, you'll have as many chips as you want. That's not the issue. Actually, what bothers me about it is the amount of energy that's consumed doing that. It's actually a huge amount of energy just to do that processing, and I think it's not sustainable. Actually, that level of power consumption that's required to do that. So I think one of the challenges for that community, and I'm quite sure they will fix it, they will get there, is actually being able to do this stuff in not just a computationally efficient way, but in an energy efficient way, right? That doesn't involve huge consumption of resources in order to be able to do these learning tasks. Because we have evidence that you can learn without, we are the evidence that you can learn without requiring, $1 million of computer processing time to be able to learn some very, very simple things. So it's possible, and we are the proof of it, but actually that, I think, for me, is the bigger challenge at the moment.
Right at the back.
I had a question building on what we talked about with personalization and the plethora of fields you can apply to. So my question is, how far is too far? Because we've seen some examples, for example, Fitbit collecting a lot of data that people don't necessarily want collected or aren't aware is being collected, that could give data to companies that maybe we don't want to share. So are there any limits as to how far we can take data collection and the ethical use of it?
Right. I think this is number one, it's a very good question. You always have this sort of the double-edged sword there, right? When you personalize, you need your data. And then there is an issue about privacy, the issue of ethical consideration. Agree entirely. And in fact, one of the very big advantage of China have now is they are relatively relaxed with this kind of data privacy, right? So because for reason, they actually have a very easy way to collect a lot of the data and train a very nice models, for example, for facial recognition, right? Which I agree with entirely. This is a very interesting subject, not just the research, but it is also a very important sort of the social science problems imposed. But there's one big research area as a computer scientist to really working on this one, is how to do the privacy preserve analysis, right? There's quite a lot of, one is the technology coming in the area of the algorithm development. You can really try to understand, aggregate the information without touch too much about personal details. There's a big research area. And it also have the infrastructure area research. For example, people heard a lot about this blockchain concept, right? So this is allow actually certain data be actually publicly used without knowing a particular personal ownership. So therefore, in this case, all the personal identity, the ownership is clear. Identity can be actually hidden. So this kind of the technologies also be developed. So therefore, people are aware of this. Technology development will along this line to actually find a balance between understand the personal information without really invade the personal personality or your privacy. That was pretty much the area which should be put a lot of efforts on in our research.
One thing that I can add from our experience of dealing with patients and patients' data being very confidential data to us, it's extremely key for companies to take responsibility to communicate that, to communicate what's happening to your data many times, get them to sign it, get them to consent to it. And we have sometimes this culture of like doing whatever we want, especially internet companies in the US, they've been pushing this trend, pushing policies and terms without us wanting it, without us understanding it. And that ruins the trust, the general trust to the whole industry. And Facebook did that a few times. They changed their privacy policies and created a lot of bad taste in the users. And I think that's one of the reasons that nobody that at least I know is using Facebook anymore. And it is up to every one of us that has connections to technology companies, access to decision makers, to put it that we need to communicate to the users. We need to tell them. We need to tell them many times. And yes, it might be sometimes bothering us, but knowing it better than not knowing it. And if you do that, we are all intelligent and we understand, and you can balance the risk and rewards. I can share my heart rate variation, ECG, etc., and if I can be in a position that before I have heart attack, I get an alert, I like it, I do it. Another person might not want it, which is fine. It's up to us to decide. And we need to be very responsible on this topic and let people to decide for themselves. And this is not the case right now. And hence why some of these things you hear, and people trying to do cheeky stuff, making the whole terms complicated. And I'm up for very direct consent, communicating to the patients or users as a whole.
Thanks, Dan. Oh, sorry, Michael, you want to?
No, I was just going to add, completely agreed. So this idea of differential privacy, ways of being able to use data without being able to go back to any individual and attribute the data to any individual, I think that's a really exciting research area which shows promise. In my bleak moments, though, I think privacy as we were used to it, actually that genie is out of that bottle and it's just gone, and we're not going to go back to some world where our data is private in the way that we were used to, because you just can't exist in society without leaving a trail of your personal data. I mean, each of you, as you made your way here, you just left a data, you were radiating data to the world, which was being collected about you, whether or not you realized you were doing it. So I just don't see that we're going to go back to the world that we used to live in. We are in a transition time, I think, and we haven't yet figured out what that equilibrium is going to be in the future about that balance between what is public and what is private. But what I'm absolutely certain about is it won't look like the thing that we were used to about private data. our lives are lived in public, whether or not we like it, and privacy as we used to know it, I think, is just gone.
Totally agree.
Well, yeah. Sorry? Oh, that's the last question. Okay. So we have one final question. Yes, over there? Oh, sorry. Yeah, you.
Great question.
Hello, I'm a British civil servant, so I'm not going to discuss the efficiency of British government. But we can discuss about American government. Sorry, Americans. For the efficiency or improving by adding artificial intelligence into government work, one thing what I've been worried about is that government projects often links to moral values, which is not measurable or can be quantified within 20 years. These could be leading some consequential values, either beneficial or harmful to society, perhaps even 30 or even longer years. How do we make artificial intelligence in terms of valuable to measure the moral values in addition to economic values? Thank you.
All right, I do first then. Yeah, I think this is a really, really, really good question. All right? And one of the work we are doing, and in fact, we have proposed a CDT to the EPSRC for funding, is really the AI for the future society, really focus on this issue, the AI for social good. Very much concerned about algorithm bias, for example, right? And also the decision bias, and then really focus on when you create a machine decision, how can you actually have the moral standard be built in? That's actually an extremely exciting question. So AI governance, and also how to really think about it, building this kind of measurement, but also not just measurement, certain kind of influence into this AI development and AI algorithm when you make decision. It's actually quite an interesting research. There are big area here. I don't think this is now we take into serious research yet, but it's coming to people's attention, and people are aware of this now. So one thing we are really considering is it's actually quite complicated problem. It's coming from a data point, or in most of the take a machine learning example, the model built has come from the data, right? So therefore, machine really don't know too much, and they basically find the statistics models out of it. But then there will be a lot of bias will be introduced during it. But now how you actually do data collection side, how to actually check of this, how to evaluate this by machine with human together to understand the bias, that'll be very interesting. That's why I come to the point of this symbiotic relationship between human and the machine. You got to do this together, right? Particularly in the government, in the decision making, in that area. It's very important, even in the medical, right? If your doctor make a decision, how do you know this decision is not really have certain kind of bias? You got to understand that. But probably in the medical, you probably easy in a way of from a scientific point of view. But in the government, in the policy, it's slightly different. For example, the gender, the race, you have to all take into consideration, rather than you charge some insurance for certain people just because of certain of the race, and then you will charge them more premiums for actually the insurance money. That's not right. But it's come from the machine. How can you judge it? So that is a big area, I think. No answer yet, but that's a research direction.
I think I would say, this is where we're used to the idea of AI kind of augmenting our intelligence, but actually this is where humans are needed to augment AI.
Exactly.
I mean, because we are the arbiters of what is morally or ethically acceptable. It's humans. I think that's where human decision-making plays a key role, and why when I think of AI, the kind of developments that we will see over the next 10 years, what I think of is them augmenting human decision-making, not replacing it. Yeah. So it's not the case that necessarily there's just going to be robot doctors, but doctors that are augmented by AI technologies, giving them an extra voice in the room, if you see what I mean. I would say two things, though. Firstly, I think we can be very precious about human intelligence and human moral decision-making. And actually, when you put it under the microscope, actually very often it turns out that we're not quite as good as we might like to think that we are. So an example, in Durham in the UK, the police force in Durham took an AI system which was basically giving them advice about whether or not to detain potential criminals overnight in their cells. And so they delegated this task, just looking at a whole bunch of data on an individual, they delegated this task to a computer program. And there was an uproar. Human rights activists said, this is outrageous. This is dehumanizing. You're passing over this decision about whether somebody gets put in a cell, you're giving that to a computer program. But actually, if you look at miscarriages of justice in this country, we don't have a good track record, actually. I mean, the police force in this country is phenomenal, but they have a track record of getting things wrong. So human judgment is often just not that great. So we can be a bit precious. That's what I mean about that. And actually having another voice in the room can be a useful thing. But the other thing I want to say is that actually values are not universal. They are based on the values that people have in China will not be quite the same as the values that people have in this country, will not be quite the same as the values that people have in the United States. Just a trivial example, it's not a trivial example, it's a very serious example, but whether or not you're allowed to have a gun, okay? And in this country, basically the answer is no. In the United States, basically the answer is yes. And if you put two people from those two different cultures, which appear very similar in most respects, and get them to debate that point, there'll just be no communication. It will just be, it's a fundamental right that people will fight for in the US, and in this country it's an absurdity. Why would you even go there? So, those things are very much culture driven, and it's actually can be quite hard to dig down to core values. And if you think about giving those values to a machine, which people are thinking about, actually it's very difficult.
I guess one example that's related to healthcare, and that's why some pharmaceutical companies are a little bit worried about the future of AI in healthcare, because a lot of drugs are being used because of people being biased about it. And they have these sales engines across the globe selling the drugs the way they want it, based on relationships, based on, and then doctors also are biased this is one perspective. And then second perspective is sometimes doctors, they don't know everything. Things changes, new drugs come. And there are some studies that machines might be able to be in better positions to prescribe the drugs, or at least come up with the suggestions, and the doctor override it if they decided for whatever reason. And this is something that we're going to see it in a lot of government decisions going forward. Anything that is complicated and has some human aspects to it, having a help and support of the machine as a one suggestion, it's a good thing, because ultimately people, they need to argue, okay, this is the right decision. If yes, great, 2 people or 1.5 people are kind of agreeing. If not, what are the reasons, 1, 2, 3? So ultimately, I think it will help us to make better decisions, less biased decisions, and decisions that consider much bigger perspective of the situations, rather than what our brain and attention can focus at any point of time. And governments are not the best because of just the size of the organizations and the complexities that they're dealing with. So I think it will have a positive impact. Again, when and how, we have to see. And it will be baby steps initially, with some big contributions coming in years to come.
Brilliant. Leaving feeling very positive about AI. So big thank you to our speakers again for coming, and thank you to the audience.